Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for joining us from different parts of the world. It's good to see you all here again in the Liberation Circle. And well, as we gather here tonight, we are still witnessing the ongoing genocide in Gaza and in the West Bank. Despite the so-called ceasefire, the destruction continues and the immense human suffering continues. Entire neighborhoods have been erased. Families are living under conditions of violence, displacement, hunger, and profound uncertainty. And this violence does not emerge from nowhere. Many people understand what we are witnessing within a much longer history, a history shaped by colonialism, occupation, and imperial power. The geopolitical dominance of states, including the role of Israel and the United States in the region, continues to shape the conditions we see today. This includes the widening tensions across the Middle East and the recent escalation involving Iran. At the same time, much of the Western political world continues to align itself closely with the policies of the United States and Israel, often offering political, military, or diplomatic support despite the scale of human suffering we are witnessing. Only a few countries, Spain among them, have taken clearer steps to publicly challenge this course. In Liberation Circle, we try not to look away from these realities. As Anuradha said in the Signal group, words matter. How we name suffering matters. At the same time, as practitioners, we also ask, how do we remain present to suffering of this magnitude, without turning away, without becoming numb, and without hardening our hearts? And this is where the Dharma meets the world. And this is also where tonight's conversation begins. Because for some practitioners, these questions are not only philosophical or ethical, they are also deeply personal. They are woven into family histories, into diasporic identities, and into the lived experience of belonging to a people whose suffering is unfolding before the eyes of the world. Our guest tonight, Vince Fakhoury Horn, speaks from within that intersection. Many of you may know Vince as a meditation practitioner, teacher, and the co-founder of Buddhist Geeks, a project that has explored how the Dharma is evolving in contemporary culture and how it intersects with technology, identity, and community. But Vince also brings another dimension to this conversation. He's Palestinian-American, and his reflections emerge from the meeting place of Buddhist practice and Palestinian history, identity, and lived experience. Tonight, he will speak with us about what he calls the Palestinian-American Dharma, a reflection on how Buddhist practice meets history, grief, identity, and the aspiration for liberation. But before we begin, I would like to invite us all into a particular way of listening and speaking. This is a painful and complex topic. People carry different histories, fears, and experiences of loss. In this space, we try to listen and speak with care, not rushing to debate or defend, but first seeking to understand one another. So please let us listen and speak with curiosity, humility, and respect for the dignity of every voice. So tonight, let us listen carefully, with courage, steadiness, and with the wish that our practice becomes more capable of meeting the suffering of this world. Vince, we are really grateful that you are here with us tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Dirk. Thank you, Doreen, for having me. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Great to see you. Great to meet you. Yeah, so with our time today, I would like to do two things. One is I want to give a short, I guess traditionally you call this a Dharma talk, though it won't look like a traditional Dharma talk. It'll be more of what my colleagues call a social location talk, in that I'll share a bit about my history that's relevant here to the conversation of Palestine and growing up in America, and the way that itself I learned later was the middle way. I was living in the middle way without recognizing. I'll tell you how I came to realize that my life is the middle way. And then the other thing I'd love to do is introduce a practice that we could do together. It's rather than a guided meditation, it's a social practice, a social meditation. And the name of this practice is called both and noting. And the basic idea is that we would practice noticing what's happening in our experience and then making space for what we imagine the opposite of that might be. It's a way of practicing the middle way and taking this out of theory into practice. So I'd like to offer those two things. We'll have time also for questions and talking and sharing. But yeah, those are the two things I aim to share today. So yeah, again, thank you for being here. I appreciate your presence. So in essence, what I'm going to share here today is a bit of my life story. And I want to share it in terms of three major inflection points that I've become aware of only recently with respect to my experience of being Palestinian and growing up in America. In terms of the backstory, I'm Palestinian on my mother's side. My mother, Rania, was born in Kuwait. She was born to Latif Fakhoury, her father, and to her mother, Peggy Fakhoury. And so from very early on, growing up with my mom and my grandparents, I actually moved in with my grandparents at age 2. So in essence, I say he's my grandfather, but really Latif was my father figure growing up. So I was raised by him. He left Palestine in 1948 along with his 8 brothers and parents. He went from Egypt, where he finished his schooling, to the US, where he went to college. He was lucky to have made it to the US, actually, because he almost didn't make it through Ellis Island due to some pretty obvious racism and bigotry at the very beginning of his journey to try to make it here. He almost didn't. Fortunately, he was able to contact a professor at the college he had been accepted to, and they found a way to get him through. And growing up, I remember just hearing story after story from my grandfather about all the ways that he'd experienced subtle and not so subtle racism, bigotry. Because I grew up, in a mixed race family, I wasn't on the receiving end of as much of that as he was. So a lot of what I learned there came from stories and secondhand from watching. And that's part of my own story here that I'll share with you. Please excuse the the Zoom situation here, but I'm going to share this over this little graph over top of. You should be able to see me too. Kind of weird, but cool. So there are these basically the 3 inflection points I noticed in my own experience of being Palestinian in America. One is as a young person, I grew up in the southern United States. So I grew up in rural North Carolina. I look today, the demographics of the county I grew up in were 97% white when I was growing up. I believe that the 3% of non-white people all lived in my neighborhood, in fact. So growing up in this environment, which was extremely, it was in the Bible Belt. It was extremely Southern Baptist, which is an evangelical form of Christianity. and extremely white. The way that I got along was mainly just denying that I was Palestinian at all. I didn't really talk about it with folks outside of my immediate family or people who had come to my home and knew that my grandfather didn't look like everyone else. And that was mainly just a way to get along, and to kind of maintain the belief that I was somehow normal, even though internally I knew something I wasn't kind of like everyone else. It became harder to do this, to just deny this reality after 9/11. I was a freshman in college at the time, and very immediately after this event, in a somewhat similar way as how things precipitated off after October 7th, there was this immediate backlash. And the backlash that I felt in my family system was the targeting of my family members, mostly by the U.S. government. My grandfather landed on the quote unquote million person Arab list, just a list of people who have connections to the Middle East who are in America, who either had business or family or traveled there. It didn't take much to land on the list. And so every time he tried to travel, either domestically or internationally, he and my grandmother were, asked to go to a room, interrogation room, and usually had to sit in there for at least a few hours, but as long as 8 hours. They'd miss their flights as a result, and often be interrogated by people who were so young that they hadn't been living in this country for nearly half the amount of time that my grandfather had. So, completely insane. And then the IRS also started targeting his businesses in a strange timing, for suddenly the IRS to be super interested in all the businesses that my grandfather ran. He was an entrepreneur. So my experience at that point was just kind of one of shock, like, oh my gosh, this can happen, where people that I love can be targeted by the government, and everyone can think it, can really just kind of ignore it and avoid it. I suddenly realized then that in order to continue on, I'd have to actually actively avoid being Palestinian. I could no longer just pretend that I wasn't or deny the reality, but rather I had to kind of actively avoid being Palestinian, which was interesting because at the very same time I had encountered the Buddhist tradition and began around 19 to start to practice seriously. I don't know if there was any real connection between those two events. Looking back, I don't remember there being a conscious one, but I find it interesting that they co-arose. So in a lot of ways, in my early practice years, I was mostly training at the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts. I was able to largely just kind of spiritually bypass my way through the issue. I learned all these great skills for transcending identity and not having to think about my identity, or finding some identity that exists beyond the human identity, something like this. And that worked for a while for me. I was able to kind of, just kind of transcend the pain. Of course, it didn't go away, and it came at a huge cost, because it's extremely selfish move to just be like getting away from the pain while you can, while plenty of people you know and care about are still suffering, including family members who live in the West Bank, and their families who I know. So the cost of kind of being okay myself was to kind of turn my back and my heart away from the people who I loved that were suffering. To kind of carve a space out in this sort of bubble of white privilege and pretend like I belong there. It was really hard to do that too, because I hung out in a lot of predominantly white spaces. Like I hung out at Naropa University, where I finished my graduate degree, and I hung out at Spirit Rock Retreat Center and IMS. And one of the things that was very frustrating about avoiding being Palestinian is that people would have just assumed that I was white, and that was the whole story. And then in many of those spaces, I came to realize just how much internalized self-hatred there is amongst folks who are white, who see some of the problems with racism and the history of racism in our country. they have the good intention, I think, of trying to undermine that, but often when we're young, we don't do that skillfully. So I often felt like I was being attacked and misunderstood in those spaces, and it was quite frustrating. Like, why don't they understand that I'm not the person they think I am? Well, because I never told them, because I was hiding. And at a certain point, I couldn't hide anymore. That there was a very important inflection point that came really in 2020 with the murder of George Floyd. I was teaching a retreat along with some friends and colleagues online. This was in the middle of COVID, as you might recall, and we really didn't know how to handle the intensity of the reality of George's murder, which had literally just happened the week before our retreat. And so while we knew what was going on and we thought it was terrible and we wanted to figure out how to incorporate it into the retreat, we just didn't know how. And we didn't have the skills to do it. So it wasn't that surprising that during one of the small groups that I was leading, a wonderful Black woman who was also, she was there doing training as a mindfulness teacher, but she was also a leader in the Christian tradition. It was no surprise to me now looking back that she called me to task for this in the middle of the group. She said, "Why aren't you speaking to the reality of George's murder? Like, this is crazy." And I could not deny that what she was saying was true. So I just was stunned into silence. I felt extremely uncomfortable, sort of feeling like, oh, I should be the one leading this group. And yet I knew that what she was saying was true. And I had no right to be acting like the authority in this group. So I just sat and listened to her and just felt super uncomfortable for about an hour. And then that really, her putting my feet to the fire and me having to sit with this discomfort of like, yeah, how is it that I continue to avoid this stuff? Because avoiding it is also avoiding the issues that are at the heart of my very family's existence. And I just couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't turn my back on my own family, and I couldn't turn my back on my Black friends and community members and mentors. And so I stopped hiding at that point. I made the choice, this inflection point, to accept the reality of my Palestinianness, and not only just accept it, but to lead with that reality. I started going by Vince Fakhoury Horn instead of going by Vince, and I started to speak about it more intentionally and weave it into my teachings more. I started to come out of the closet basically as a Palestinian. And for the most part, that was fine because no one really knew much about Palestine. And, at the time, I had a lot of people that were supporting me in that. It felt like I was riding the sort of wave of kind of social awakening that was happening. And then we all know what happened, right? We all know the history here. There's a backlash. Trump comes in for a second term. October 7th, of course, happens before this. The neoliberal leadership in my country just completely supports Israel, carte blanche. And I'm online mostly on social media going, what the hell? This is going to be a genocide. They just turned off the water. And like this, the 3 days in, they turned off the water and shut off food. I'm like, what is this other than a genocidal intent? Like, I don't know how else to, I'm not a legal scholar, but when you stop, letting food and water in somewhere, surely the intention is clear. So for me, it's like from day one, like, this is obvious. This is clear. This is going to be a huge backlash. Lots of people are going to die. We've seen this pattern again and again, at least I had, having been aware of what happens every time Palestinians do anything violent toward Israelis. And so I just knew it was going to be awful. And I was sort of screaming from the rooftops. And the backlash was intense and fierce. I lost a lot of friends. I lost my teachers. I lost a lot of work opportunities, most of which I'm just sort of surmising that I lost because people didn't actually reach out to me, tell me that. They just stopped reaching out. And yet, like, there's no way I was going back. At this point, I'm not going to come back to denying my Palestinianness, even if the cost is all of this stuff, which is to me seems fairly minor. It's like not a huge cost relative to what the cost that people are actually bearing, who live there. It's like, this is pretty not a big deal. I remember in the middle of Hurricane Helene, which really affected our area. We were out of power for a good week. We lost water for 3 months. Really impacted our life in a pretty severe way. And even during that was even while that was happening, I was so grateful that it wasn't disrupted at nearly the level that folks in Gaza were experiencing. I just couldn't believe what a difference we were making about, a natural disaster here, and a disaster that was happening. It was man-made and happening every single day for years on end there. And just the gap between the American perspective and perception of what's happening and between that and what I'm hearing from my cousin Rania in the West Bank, just such a huge gap. And living in that gap made me realize, like, I'm living in the middle way. This is exactly the middle way practice. I learned from one of my early teachers, Ken MacLeod. He said the practice of the middle way is when we hold two things in attention together at once. That's the actual practice. And, when I was denying and avoiding my Palestinianness, I wasn't practicing the middle way because I wasn't holding that in attention. I didn't include that as part of who I was. It's only been since 2020 that I've actually been practicing this real middle way.
Prince, can you repeat that, you just said, the last minute? Because it struck me so much, and I think it's very essential for me.
Yeah, sure. So what I
Yeah.
was saying is, like, I had learned in my Buddhist practice that the practice of the middle way is when you hold two seemingly opposite things in attention at once. You include both in your attention. For me, while I was denying and avoiding being Palestinian, I wasn't able to practice the middle way because I wasn't including that part of my experience in attention. So I couldn't be transformed by it. I had to take the Faustian bargain of whiteness and just sort of, uh, you know, be protected in one hand from having to see how much pain my existence causes. But the reality was the pain of being white and not being disrupted was causing pain to my own family members. And the reason I didn't say anything and I didn't speak up, the reason I was denying and avoiding this is really just because of fear. I didn't want to be persecuted. I didn't want to go through the stuff I was seeing my grandfather have to go through. It was selfish. I acknowledge that now. I'm embarrassed to say it now that that's where I was, but it's true. And I see a lot of my family members are still there. So I try to also be empathetic. But the practice of the middle way, the last thing I want to say here is, like, this has been the practice for me the whole time. Growing up as a non-Christian in a totally Christian dominated space, holding in attention both realities. I'm not going to become a Christian because everyone is a Christian, although that would probably make it easier socially to do. Growing up in a family that wasn't completely white, certainly we didn't seem like the white families culturally. Loud, a lot of fighting, a lot of yelling, a lot of great food and flavors. And so, it's something where I, again, have held the middle way of being both white and non-white, of experiencing this multi-ethnic experience of holding two realities at once in an environment where people really want you to pick. It's like you have to be one or the other so I can understand you. No, I'm sorry, I'm not. And then also my family was from the North, Northern America. They came and moved to the South. So we grew up in the South, Northerners. And if you know about the history of America in the North and South, this is the original fault line, right, around the Civil War. So culturally, it was like being a Northerner living in the South. And being an American, here I am, someone living I live in a town whose name is still the Cherokee name for this place, Swannanoa. So it's like, how can I deny the reality that I grew up taking advantage of this unearned land? At the same time, my grandfather came here because of the same situation. So I can't deny that I am both. I my lineage includes both persecutors and victims. you know. And when I go back and look at the broader history of America, most white Americans that were coming here were also experiencing persecution, religious persecution often. So we have to acknowledge this history, right? It's like, oh, if I can't locate myself on either side, if I actually include both of these realities, how does that change the way that I approach Dharma? I can't just say I'm on the good side, you know, and make it a real simple moral thing of like, I'm in the right position and therefore everything I do and say is good and right. It's like, oh, well, you know, that doesn't really work. Look at what's happening in Palestine right now. That does not work. We can't simply inhabit the mantle of victim and say everything that we do because of our pain, because of the pain that's been caused us, justifies the further perpetuation of it. No, that doesn't work. So for me, living in the middle way means no easy answers. And if you get it right, most people are going to dislike you. And that's actually a good sign. You know you're living in the middle way when everyone thinks you're crazy or is upset with you for not joining them in their extreme position. So this is what I want to share about Palestinian-American Dharma, just a little of my own experience of living through this middle way and of just gradually and slowly having the courage to care more about the people I love than to protect my own ass. You know, and I think that's more or less what the path has been and where it seems like it will continue heading for me.
Wow.
Love to open it up here or just,
Yeah, well,
back the mic.
Vince, thank you so much for your honest and heartfelt testimony. I'm sure that it is very inspiring to hear you talk about your personal history and your personal practice. This is for me really touching and inspiring. I'm lost for words even, so my English is a bit down now. So please, if there's anybody who would like to ask a question or have a reaction to what Vince confided with us just now, there's a lot to say about it. So please, is there somebody with a question right now? The sitting at the table is open for you. Okay, Theodore.
Thank you so much for sharing. I usually don't respond, but I will. It feels to me that you have just described the entrance to meditation. When we first begin to practice, even our rudimentary first practice, exactly how your life proceeded from birth till now is what we discover in our own body. And you had the courage and the karma somehow to not turn away from it. And the deepest pain that I feel is that at this stage, with where the world is, these people who have held up the Dharma for us are themselves refusing to go that extra mile to embrace the internal and the external experience. And
yes, that's true.
And I'm just at awe with this cognizant dissidence. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, this is something I've shared about, you know, with my own teachers, Jack Kornfield and Trudy Goodman. We really split up over this, you know, and over their unwillingness to kind of publicly support, like from my point of view, it's like publicly support my family. From their point of view, I think, you know, they heard me asking them to be activists or be more of an activist than they already are, which wasn't what I was doing. And for me, I understand that they're scared, you know, because I understand that the reason I wasn't speaking up was I was scared. So that must be the same for them. Different conditions, but the same fear. So on the one hand, I can empathize. On the other hand, it's I couldn't continue to empathize and not say anything, because the reality is, by not saying anything, they've enabled something which is just horrible.
Oh, thank you. Good, very nice and inspiring question. So, is there anybody else who would react or respond to what has been said?
Mer?
Hi, thank you so much for holding this space. I am Iranian American. I was born in Iran. My family immigrated here in the early 80s, but shortly after the revolution. So I grew up in America and kind of came to age in America. So I very much resonate with your life story, Vince, and especially the graph that you showed about the denial, avoidance, and eventually reconciliation with our identities, the diaspora. I also had a partner who was Dutch for over a decade, a long time ago. So I am also reconciliating my identity and all of my relational, engagements as I'm going through that reconciliation process. So I really, really appreciate you kind of being vocal about this. I learned about you actually through Jack and Trudy. I live here in California. I started my Dharma practice over a decade ago with the Vipassana tradition, doing a silent meditation. But then I very immediately found a home inside LA. And I am now going through the 2-year course that Jack Cornfield and Tara Brock teach. And I was at an in-person Insight LA event where I heard Trudy not speak about you through name, but speak about you through how they were experiencing perhaps the criticisms that they were getting. And so I searched to see what they were talking about, and I found you. And I found the talk that you had recorded on your site, and was very moved by your articulation of kind of the why. Why is it important for Dharma teachers to speak up? And I'm finding the same struggle now with this meditation training. I'm part of a cohort with 8 wonderful ladies, most of whom are Palestinian, and most of whom actually live in Palestine right now. And we are all struggling with how to adapt the Dharma teachings into a teaching that really is able to be in that reconciliatory acceptance fashion. And we're looking for guidance because we're not able to really find the guidance. And I would say that a lot of my Palestinian lovely just comrades are trying in their own ways to really put the pressure as you have, and we're getting very minuscule almost responses that just quite is not as phony. And so I hope you can just speak a little bit about how we can actually go about as future Dharma teachers, the Palestinian, Iranian, West Asian kind of diaspora even spaces to really transform this, if you have some words of advice for that.
Yeah, I mean, none that I've figured out completely for myself, but things I've been thinking about, of course. Yeah, I mean, one, I think the very structure of training in the Insight tradition, wherein the focus is on your individual practice in silence with others, is problematic, and we need to redesign the entire structure of training. Interestingly, like, I've been doing that with my partner Emily, who's in the Insight tradition as well. Like, we've been doing that ourselves, but I think what part of what we've learned could be shared more widely. One is like we don't do retreats anymore in silence. We do retreats where there's some periods of silence and there's always some period of social practice, which we'll do some of here today, where you're actually meditating out loud with others. And the reason I think that's so important is it makes the practice inherently relational. It means social stuff will come up and you can't avoid it and ignore it, which is what the silent retreat container allows you to do, is to sweep things under the rug. Which on the one hand is great for community coherence, but it's terrible if for the people whose stuff just keeps getting swept under the rug perpetually. So I think, yeah, having practice that's focused on the social dimension and then also explicitly includes the world, and not just self, but self, others, and the world. All three of these have to be the domain of practice. And Dharma has to have something useful to offer. Otherwise, okay, why? Why are we doing this? If it doesn't touch our relationships and it doesn't touch the world. I think that's one major thing, is just thinking about the whole structure from the ground up again. And then I personally, my partner Emily and I, again, like we were thinking, how do we teach inside this tradition still? First, I thought about giving my lineage back. I thought I'd make a spectacle of it and be like, I'm giving it back. And then I realized, well, that's just going to harm me. And I feel like I'm actually standing in the moral center of my lineage better than my own teachers are right now around this. So why the hell should I be the one to give my lineage back? And I realized, no, I've got to continue forward with this tradition, but in a new way. So I think actually having, like we're focused on like creating a little bit of a community practice space called the Insight Diaspora. But I think having spaces like this, like the one that Liberation Circle represents, and I see Anuradha, you're here with your community and what you all have been doing, and the East Bay Meditation Center. There are these communities already that have been pioneering these alternative Dharma spaces where, already they've, questioned that structure and have opened it up. So I think, being able to align ourselves with those communities as well, and be able to kind of tap into what people have already been learning here is really quite useful as well for us. Is that helpful?
It's very, thank you.
Okay, and feel free to reach out if there's anything I can personally do to support you.
That was really spot on question and answer. So I see Anuradha, please.
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome.
So glad you're here.
Hey guys, Vince, so nice to meet you.
Likewise, I've been hearing your name everywhere I go recently.
I've
For good reason.
my name as well. Yeah, I'm calling in from Jordan, and there's a lot happening in the sky right now overhead.
Yeah, I bet.
Constant air raid missiles and fighter jets and bombs exploding. So it's, we're really in it. I was really moved by Miriam. I don't know if I'm saying your name right. I was really moved by what you shared, and kind of like almost brought to tears, because I so badly want there to be spaces where folks like us don't have to go through this mental acrobatics and this, I mean, it feels like torment, and it's been going on for so long. Just feel like literally feeling the reverberations of what the United States and Israel are doing to this part of the world several times a day in and day out for months on end. It's a lot. And Vince, you seem like such a kind person. And I kind of want to just throw you this hardball question, which is like,
please,
how can you possibly stay in this insight tradition with these awful racist people? And that's, I don't say this lightly, obviously, but I've just seen so much harm long before October 7th against our peoples. I've seen so much white supremacy in so many different forms. And it honestly it starts for me with the appropriation of Indian and Asian traditions. Jack Cornfield has made a mockery of my people's traditions, and can I forgive him? Yeah, I forgive him. He's human. He's like an uncle, right? He's an old Jewish uncle at this point, but like he has done so much harm, I never got to meet some of his other proteges. You know, I practiced within Insight for 10 years before I was so heartbroken
Mm,
that I realized I could not be a whole person if I continued to study. I was dishonoring my ancestors. I was dishonoring Palestinians. I was dishonoring the entire African diaspora. I was, and on and on. I mean, this could really go on, but you get my point. I wonder, like, why is it worth saving? Like, why would you be, I feel alone, but not, I, it's like I felt alone and horrible when I was with Insight. Now I feel alone and like
mm,
I know who I am. And so when I find people like Liberation Circle, you know, when I find people like
mhm,
us,
mhm.
yeah, I feel a little less alone, right? But
Yeah,
I know like my heart is kind of in in a right place where I can act more according to my values. And
sure.
I just want to encourage you and Maren, you know, all of these other folks, come on, come on, come on. Like we can build this. We can build this without Jack and Joseph and Sharon and
I agree.
you know?
Totally. No, I'm with you on that. Yeah, for me, it's I feel like that is true, and it's true regardless of whether I align myself with the word insight. Um, and like I said, I went through this process of really contemplating that. Should I just reject this entirely? And I guess the way I understand lineage is the way I understand it in the same way that I understand family. You know, family is a lineage. And, you know, growing up in a Palestinian family where there was a lot of wounding and a lot of intergenerational harm as a result of that wounding. There were periods where I thought about just rejecting my own family entirely. You know, I moved to Colorado for 10 years and I was away from my family. Fortunately, I did a lot of healing work and was able to then move back to this area. And my wife and I started our family here near our families. And I think for me, this feels similar where it's like a huge wound in the family, the Insight family system. And I do need to take space from it. Like I'm not teaching at these institutions. I'm not talking to these teachers. I have created some real boundaries around the kind of thing I'm willing to engage with there from people in that tradition. And yet I don't want to completely reject them because of what I learned about my own family. And, you know, and it's like, well, yeah, I somehow want to find my way through this pain without completely rejecting what's been good about this family for me. And yeah, that's a it is a real struggle. And I'm not suggesting everyone, like in the same way that everyone shouldn't try to make things right with their families of origin. Like there really are situations where people need to like completely pull themselves out and not associate at all with their families of origin. I totally get that. In the same way, I totally honor if someone really feels like they need to cut themselves off from a lineage and not be part of it anymore. I probably, if I were early on in my practice life and I hadn't already, you know, completed these trainings and done all this stuff, I probably would. I probably would leave. I'd be disillusioned. My mom is in the middle of the 4-year teacher training right now with them. And I see it's extremely difficult for her. You know, and I don't know how to support her in that, to be honest. Because she, on the one hand, a lot of her reputation and credibility within the space is tied to that tradition. On the other hand, she's totally heartbroken, you know, that they've said so little and it's, you know, and have really not stood for Palestinians at all. So yeah, I don't know. This is just my honest response. It's a great question. I hear you. I do. I respect your choice.
Yeah, I think you have a very generous outlook. I appreciate it. And I hope we can keep supporting one another, you know, and offering space where like it pains me to hear that your mother, who's, you know, even closer to the source,
Yeah,
is
she's even
going
closer
through
to it.
this.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I'm feeling so empathic right now around people in all of our traditions. But thank you, Vince.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot to hold. You're right. It's kind of
Yeah.
it is a lot.
Well, thank you so much, Anuradha. I feel you as well, and I hear you. touches me. So stay brave there. In French, they say courage. Yeah. So perhaps one more question before we go into meditation. So Donna, I see your hand. Please
Hi,
go
Donna.
ahead.
Thank you so much, Doreen. And my question aligns with the discussion with Anuradha. I practice in the Plum Village tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh for
Yes.
a couple of decades. And so it's very similar about not being able to let go of that tradition. Especially in this case, Thich Nhat Hanh has passed on. And when I go back to anything Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, I still identify with his teachings. So, and it's a big, huge, and I don't know how familiar you are with that tradition, but I was just pointing out and just any insights you have about spending so much effort trying to stay in the tradition, but I think we're going to have to come down in that lineage and now be lineage based on Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings and not on the Plum Village tradition quote.
Right. Yes.
So anything you have to say about that, I'd appreciate.
Yeah. Well, I studied religion in Naropa. That was my like focus. And I was struck really in that study about how much of the case, how often it is the case that real innovations within religious traditions come out of people trying to live the original teachings with more faith. If you want to be kind of be a little nasty about it, you could call it religious fundamentalism. And that's kind of what it is in a way, like, and I don't mean this in a bad sense, but people really trying to find out what the fundamental truth of the religion is and live it, ends up leading to real changes in the religious traditions and institutions. So, I mean, you can change things from the inside and you can change things from the outside. You know, there's different ways to affect change. And yeah, I'm with you. I guess part of the task seems to be like, okay, well, what does it mean to practice and teach inside of an evolving lineage that's no longer okay, kind of serving the social function that it currently does. Like the insight tradition serves this function of like, you know, allowing people to have a spirituality where they can just focus on themselves and they don't have to talk about anything that's difficult politically. You know, it's structured perfect for that. Like, no, like, how do we do this differently? It's not going to be as easy in a way. So yeah, I hear you. Yeah, finding the original like spirit of Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings would probably look not like the current Plum Sangha. I don't know. Like I'm not close enough to say that, but it might be the same. It's like really following Jack's teachings might look like not following Jack. You know?
Well, that's a dharmic paradox you're stating right now, Vince.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for your question, Donna, because also perhaps everything started with Thich Nhat Hanh in the West because of the Vietnam War. So there are some similarities there. And when I remember well, there was a lot of anger about with him. He talked about it in his little book of mindfulness. It's really worthwhile to read it. So perhaps, Vince, you can guide us into meditation now. You have perhaps some explanations about the setup.
Yeah. I thought it would be nice to do some practice together that is social instead of guiding a practice. The challenge I have I still guide meditation sometimes when I'm teaching, but the challenge I have with guiding meditation is it's a one-to-many broadcast mode. It is essentially an authoritarian teaching style. If you have a bunch of teachers at the front of the room who are all telling you what to do the whole time and you can't talk to anybody, well, that's about as authoritarian of a context as you can imagine. With social meditation, it's like opening up meditation to be more like the internet. Instead of broadcasting one to many, this is a peer-to-peer form of practice. And so I think it actually is more resilient or resistant to the kinds of things the failure modes that we've been talking about today. So the practice I'd like to share or offer is a practice called both and noting. It's a type of social noting practice. I learned social noting originally from a teacher named Kenneth Folk, who took the long-standing tradition of what's called mental noting from the Mahasi Sayadaw tradition of Southeast Asia and Burma, and he did it out loud with his students. He made a very serious break from the tradition in that he meditated out loud with other people. In the early Buddhist tradition, in the Mahasi tradition, that is a taboo. It's both a taboo to meditate out loud, and it's also a taboo to meditate in a social way. So he broke both of those taboos. But it turns out that it's a much more effective way to teach. If you as a meditation teacher can hear how your students are practicing, and you can give them much better feedback. And if they can see how you're practicing, if you can demonstrate the practice to them, it's a lot easier to learn. It seems like there's pretty much nothing I can think of where we don't learn that way. Meditation is one of those weird things that somehow we talk about it in the abstract, but we don't actually show people, how to do it. So this practice for me is, it solves those problems, and it makes the practice social. It makes it inherently relational. When we meditate out loud with each other, we have to include both our own experience and the experience of others to even do the exercise. So you're pulled out of a kind of hyper introspective, individual focused frame, and now you have to, be contending with not only your experience but everyone's experience. This technique, both and noting, it's meant to highlight and hold in attention two things that appear as opposite together at once. Does anyone here have experience with the noting method? Has anyone here experienced that, where you've used notes or labels to identify what's happening moment to moment? Okay, some of you have. For those that haven't, this technique is quite simple. You would just say moment to moment, whatever it is that you're noticing. You could use a word or two to describe it. Like right now, there's thinking about what to say next. There's dryness. I'm noticing tightness, anxiety, self-consciousness, releasing, boredom, amusement, seeing, connecting, enjoying. Here I'm just real-time narrating the things that are arising in my experience, moment to moment. That's out loud noting. In this technique, we're going to combine that with kind of a little bit of an imaginal move. So if you imagine, for instance, okay, see what you're noticing right now, what's predominant in your experience, and give it a word or two label to yourself, like there's thinking, I'm thinking right now. Okay, then imagine what the opposite of that experience is. What is the opposite of thinking? Again, use just a word or two. There's thinking and stillness, maybe. Both breathing and not breathing. Both thinking and silence. Both feeling the body and noticing the mind. This is the basic practice. I'm saying both blank and blank. The first blank, I'm filling in with whatever it is I'm actually noticing in my experience. I'm noting it. And then the second blank, I'm filling in with something I imagine is the opposite of this. So both whatever it is you're experiencing and the thing you imagine is the opposite of that. Both dryness and wetness. Both fear and ease, both slowing down and enlivening. Okay, that's the basic technique that I want to suggest we do together. And we do this in small groups of 3 or 4 people each. and we just sort of take turns. That's the basic instruction. When it's your turn, if you're doing the practice out loud and you don't know what to say, you could just say thank you, or pass, or don't know. Any variation on that. We call this the safety release valve. So if it's your turn and you don't know what to say, you can always just say don't know, or pass. And if you don't want to participate out loud, that's also legit. In this practice, you can always be a silent witness. We call this the witness role. So if you want to be a silent observer, you can just say witnessing when it's your turn. And people will know that means you're going to step back and just listen. So how you choose to engage in this practice is totally up to you, either as a silent observer or participating out loud. Either one is totally fine. One is not better than the other, even though we tend to think participating out loud is better. Right? Yeah. So these are the basic instructions. Let me ask if there are any questions about how to do this before you get hurled into a breakout room with strangers.
I have a question.
Yeah, please, Doreen.
Okay, when would you know that it's your turn?
Oh, good question. Well, when I first started teaching this stuff, we used to get into a small breakout room and people would say, okay, I'll go first and then I'll go second. But then I realized you don't have to do all that. Just someone go first when you get into the breakout. Then someone goes next and then someone goes after. And once everyone's gone, you have something like an order and you can just kind of stick with that. And if you can't, then it's fine. You'll do the practice out of order and that'll be okay. You'll figure it out. Yeah. Great question.
Great.
Yeah. Felix, you have a question as well?
A very elementary one. I'd like to know if you could spell the word that you're using, noding, N-O-D or N-O-T for Tom.
You got it. The second one. Noting is N-O-T-I-N-G. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Another word for this is labeling. You could use that word as well. We're using a mental, like a verbal label to describe our experience. And then Mare, please.
Would you mind just sharing the piece of instructions on where we're sharing? Are we sharing what's on our mind? Or are we sharing what's on our mind and then the opposite at the same time?
Yeah. Okay.
Are we flip-flopping? Can you just explain that? Sorry.
Yeah. No problem. This is a slightly advanced practice I'm starting you all with. So normally I do a simpler practice and then we scale up to this, but yeah, this is a little bit more advanced. So apologies. So the basic frame of the practice is both blank and blank. And the first blank, when we say both, after that, we're just going to see what we're noticing in our experience, like classic Vipassana, and then use a word or two to describe whatever it is that we're noticing that's most obvious. Both thinking, right now there's a lot of thinking, both thinking and blank, then I'm going to fill in the second blank with what I imagine is the opposite of what I've noticed. So the intention here is to kind of incline our mind toward including both what's arising and the opposite of it, so that we're kind of both and noting. Yeah, thanks. Both joy and sorrow. Yeah. Okay, are there any other questions about how to do the practice?
Not so much. I think perhaps we go ahead with it.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll have, again, you'll be in a group of 3 or 4 people each. The basic instructions are when it's your turn, you'll say both blank and blank. The first blank is what you're noticing in your experience. You could use a word or two, keep it simple. And then the second thing you're saying is what you imagine the opposite of that is, again, with a word or two. You can always pass or say don't know if you're not sure what's happening. And you're always welcome to witness if you'd like to be a silent observer. All right, sound okay? All right, we'll go for 7 minutes here, and hope you enjoy. Happy noting. Thank you. Well done. You made it. So I'd like to open it up here for few minutes and just sort of hear how was that for you? If you want to share, you could share either just a few words, like it was like this, or if you want to share a little bit more, or if you have questions about the technique and what we just did, any of that's welcome here. Yeah, thank you, Donna. You're also welcome to use the react button. Yeah. Lee, please.
I thank you for offering that. You explained it. I just started immediately trying it out in my head before we even went into groups, and I just my mind was instantly blown. I just thought, what? Because the presence of something and then thinking about its opposite, just a few steps in, I was just like, it's all here all at once. We don't have just slices of things. It just, yeah, it was.
Oh, nice. So you experienced the thing you're imagining became part of what was actually present for you and included.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Love when that happens. Yeah, cool. Thank you for sharing. I don't know who raised their hand most recently. So yeah, Peter, maybe you could go.
Yeah, it's Peter. Yeah, thank you very much, Vince. It's a lovely opportunity to explore what comes up in a very interesting new way, and to the opposite was a good one, because we, initially, because I find I go out of my mind. My mind will say planning, and then what's the opposite of not planning. But it's really an invitation to go much deeper into the process and see what's happening right now, and that's all that's happening is right now, and yeah. And yeah, it's a lovely new tool for silent meditation. Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah, you can do this silently. Yeah, you can totally do this silently, and you can do it out loud with others if people will tolerate it. I try to convince my wife every night to let me do these practices with her. Derek, yeah, please.
Thanks very much for this. This is new to me, and it's very creative and evocative, and it's a lovely way to connect with the others and feel the appreciation of the group. So thanks for introducing us to this.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Feel free to share it. I do offer facilitator trainings in this, but it's all open source and freely offered. So you're welcome to share it. Yeah, Felix, what do you got?
Thank you for this exercise. It was very, very timely for me because I'm engaged in coaching with a very, very trusted friend. And the first session ended with my saying I'm going to condense what I said, this sort of visceral hatred that I feel for Zionists and Zionism. And so his homework to me was, I want you to consider someone who is as knowledgeable as you are about Palestine and as compassionate as you are about Palestine, but who has a different opinion from yours, an opposite opinion from yours, and would you be able to consider that person your brother or sister? So this was sort of on that same trajectory. I found it very trying, but necessary.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Fritz, please.
Yeah, I thought it was a wonderful practice of it gave a very direct sense of inclusiveness. That was the word that arose in me. I really appreciated that very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to to name the comment here from Anuradha, yeah, that this could also be potentially like gaslighting, the therapist setup. I had some questions about that myself. I'm like, yeah, that sounds like it'd be hard to find that person. But at the same time, I appreciate the spirit of wanting to include something that maybe you traditionally are sort of hating. You're at that point where you're just like, I completely just fucking hate this. That something in that seems like it could be a good invitation to me. But yeah, I've been exploring my own anti-Zionism here and wondering, because I've never particularly found I've never personally found viewpoints that define themselves in terms of the opposition to something else to be particularly helpful. Like atheism, all atheists do is center God in their just continually center God. I think anti-Zionists, we have, that's the danger. We're going to keep centering Zionism in all of our conversations and never be able to let go of it and sort of see what is it that we actually stand for that's better than this. Anyway, that's the why I think we have to have both the criticism and the leading forward with a positive vision, which I don't have any answer to. I'm sorry, Fritz, I totally cut you off.
That's fine.
Please.
Yeah. But thank you. No, I was finished already, so thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the note of inclusion. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mike. And then we've probably maybe these last two comments, would that work, Dirk? And we can start wrapping up. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. It felt very honest in the sense that it was inclusive of different aspects of the meditation experience, which quite often to me seem to be not one thing. It's very easy to kid yourself, perhaps if you're sitting there nice and quiet, that you're equanimous or you've got X, Y, or Z.
Yes.
The truth for me is that there's all sorts of things going on, and to be asked to publicly, in a sense, label them meant that you couldn't really hide from them.
Yeah, right. We're like outing ourselves as being someone that experiences negative things too. Like, I too experience anxiety and fear and rage. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I want to just acknowledge we've got about 15 minutes left, and there's some things that the lovely organizers here are going to guide us through to wrap up. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time.
It's great to have you with us, Vince, and very inspiring in many, many ways. So perhaps I leave the word now to Joyce.
There are questions. There's a question. Would you share the simple preversion of this? Question of Marina. That's a question for you, Vince, I think.
Yeah, Marina, do you mean like the simpler practice that I mentioned? Is that what the reference is? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if you wanted to start with the most basic practice, it's called there is noting. And the basic instructions are you say there is, and then you use a word or two to describe whatever it is that you're noticing in your experience. There is thinking, there is breathing, there is relaxing. That's a nice way to start because it linguistically it helps put the words that you're using in what's called the gerund form. And a gerund is usually something that ends with an ing in English. And it's like verbifying a noun. You're making like a thing, a process, which is exactly what we're trying to do in that kind of practice. We're trying to see things, nouns, as processes. Yeah. Hope that's helpful. Feel free to share that with folks if they're willing to try it out. Lee and then Mark, please.
Hi. Yeah, I just put in the chat, but when they said it was time for more questions, I
saw your comment.
I've been thinking like, sorry, my video off, that
yes.
More recently, I've been just thinking like, well, I'm here in California, where genocide was committed legally, under settler law, and I was born here, and so that I've been sitting with that and just looking at a liberal Zionist, who's just like, I grew up in Israel. This is my culture and my country, and I don't know anything else. And
Right.
I too can look outside of the US and question, what is the cost to the whole rest of the world of me having this little bubble to live in comfortably with all the resources I need, and
Right.
kind of pierce that bubble for myself and look, and that is
Mm.
be able to see Zionism, because I too feel like, revulsion when I hear Zionists arguing, that they just want to kill all Arab, just the harsh, the stance of Zionism, or even just we need to be here and so we need to defend ourselves, just everything about Zionism. I just feel like I can't even engage. That's just too wrong and too horrible, and so I'm
Yeah.
sitting with
Right.
myself and saying, like, I don't know where this is going to go, but that's where I'm sitting.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for acknowledging that and admitting that. I'm with you. I'm with you on sitting in the discomfort of that. Yeah. Mark, please.
A little bit nervous because I don't have a clear question. I really appreciate all the organizers to organize, to be there. So I'm living in Holland and I'm a Buddhist for a long time. And immediately I went on the streets after 7 October to stand for Palestine. So we do demonstrations in Nijmegen every week and every month. But I don't have many friends who are Buddhists who talk about this or can really. So what I like to share. So what I do, for example, I don't walk around with a kafia, and I don't walk around with a sticker pro-Palestine because, and that's part of my question. So I want to stand up and pray and shout, but also many days a week I let it go and practice and feel love and be there for. So because if I would have it 7 days a week in me, I get more and more depressed. So do you have any advice? What is wisdom here?
Yeah, not me. I don't have much advice. Yeah, no, I mean, I, I'm reminded in your question about like when I was studying the Christian tradition, the contemplative Christian tradition at Naropa. I remember they really made an emphasis to talk about contemplation and action. And in that tradition, it's very clear, unlike perhaps in the Buddhist tradition, like it's very clear that these two are both equally important. And I think there's something about that frame that I really like. And at the same time, like I would say, I'm a baby when it comes to my capacity to take action, in a way that I think is helpful. I'm a baby activist. And so I look to a lot of other folks in this domain. I look up to a lot of other folks like Anuradha, who's here, and others who have been like really putting themselves on the line for a long time in service of their values. And I guess I would say, like as a baby who can look back at my own growth and development, it's like it is a process. It's a gradual process for many, where something really has to break you open, break your heart open enough that you're willing to do stuff that's scary. If it and have the wisdom to recognize when it's helpful. It's like I want to do this thing where I'm sacrificing and it's scary, and I'm going to do it in a way that's useful, like it's actually potentially useful, not just like me. It's not like a catharsis, where it's actually really about me. I'm just wanting, people to see me and see the pain I'm feeling, but I'm actually not doing something that might actually help alleviate that pain for others. So I think I don't know, those are some of the things I contemplate or think about around that question. I don't really have any advice except to acknowledge that, yeah, the depression, anxiety is real if you keep saying something and people aren't receiving it and it isn't going anywhere. But that actually might be a function of doing something that's also not that effective. So maybe it's like we get depressed because we care about something and we keep doing something and it's not working. Not just that like people don't care, but it's also like it's not having the impact we want. I hope that's helpful. I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Carletta, please.
Hi. So I'm wondering if you would comment on this because it's not difficult to think of one thing and an opposite. Life, death is
Right.
that's not difficult. That's noting, I'm guessing. But I understand that as we practice the principles, we do make choices, and it's skillful to support the one that is more life affirming, that is peace generating, and it's not neutral in that way.
Right.
Thich Nhat Hanh, whom I'm a practitioner as well, speaks of interbeing because they're all connected and we have all the seeds of everything, peace and violence, but it's
Right.
skillful and part of our training to support and continue the ones that are more towards
Yes.
what I've already said. So how does
Absolutely.
this practice relate
Yes.
to that?
Yeah, wonderful question. Yeah. Yeah, because this practice in a lot of ways is aiming toward having a more of a non-dual experience. It's like someone mentioned, their mind was blown within a few seconds because it's like it includes everything. Yeah, that's a kind of non-dual recognition. I think the reason it's helpful to train in that is because we can only have an experience of non-duality when we really have included everything that's present in our experience, including, like you said, the seeds of violence and the delusion. Like we have to include that too. Otherwise, we're having a transcendent experience. We're like having this experience of being vast and spacious and good and light, but we don't include all that other stuff. So the non-dual experience includes all of it. And then I think the reason it's useful to include everything is then I'm not above anyone. Like I am completely capable of the same delusional stuff as anyone else. I remember the stories coming to mind. I remember during COVID, I was outside gardening with my son. He was 5 at the time. And I had this moment of just unconsciousness. I was like using a knife to cut something open, and then this like bee was like buzzing around me, and I like swung around with my knife. And my son was not that far away from me. It wasn't so close that I got close to hitting him, but it was close enough that I was like, holy shit, I could have just hurt my son really badly because I was just unconsciously like reacting to this bee. Um, for me, it's like the more I include the real fear that's present as a Palestinian, the more I found I actually have the capacity to step out and be courageous and stay stuff. Because I'm including the fear. I'm not trying to run away from it anymore. And that ability to embrace the darks, the kind of the difficult, the contracted, the undigested, the shadow elements of experience. Like for me, the more that's fuel for wise action. Like now that I can own that as part of this experience. Like that's powerful stuff. That's powerful fuel. In my experience, it gets transmuted into fuel. But that said, I mean, some people doing non-dual stuff can get stuck thinking, "Oh, it's just about the non-dual," and then they don't make the turn toward what you're saying, Carletta, which is like, okay, now that you include everything, what's the appropriate response? Well, usually it's just basic kindness and like taking care of what you said you're going to do, stuff like that. Sometimes it's huge, courageous bravery, but usually it's just basic stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Carletta. Thank you. Vince, I'm sorry, Mayor. Is it all right to finish now? Yeah? Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you all. Many things have been touched, stirred, set in motion maybe in our thoughts, in our feelings, in our sense of the world. Thank you so much, Vince, for your sharing your reflections with us tonight. Thank you for speaking so openly about the meeting place between Buddhist practice and Palestinian history, identity, and lived experience. I think your words remind us that the path of practice is never separate from the conditions in which we live, or from the histories and communities that shape our lives. And listening tonight, I don't know who said that thing, but I was reminded of a line by the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. He writes in a beautiful poem, Think of Others, he writes one sentence, "As you prepare your breakfast, think of others." It's such a simple line, and yet a profound invitation to remember that our lives unfold in a shared and fragile world. And Vince also asked us to mention one very concrete way to respond to this invitation. And if you feel moved to do so, you may consider supporting the humanitarian work of World Central Kitchen, which is currently providing meals to people in Gaza and other crisis areas. And we will place a donation link in the chat. So, once again, thank you, Vince, for bringing your voice and your perspective into this space. And thank you to everyone who joined us from different parts of the world and who has listened with care and presence tonight. May the reflections we have heard tonight continue to deepen our practice, so that the Dharma can meet the suffering of this world with clarity, courage, and compassion. May our practice help us to remain human together. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you. Take care. Be well.
Yeah.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Take care.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.